You know, when you picture the Maya, your mind probably jumps straight to those incredible pyramids rising out of the jungle, or maybe those intricate stone calendars. But for this explainer, we're going to strip all of that away, because way before the monuments, before the kings, there were just people. So let's get into the story of where they really came from. Before a single stone was laid for the pyramids that would one day scrape the jungle canopy, before powerful kings etched their legacy into stone, trying to make their power last in eternity. And yeah, even before their famous calendars began to measure the cycles of the cosmos with this beautiful, almost terrifying precision, there were just people, communities figuring out how to survive in one of the most demanding places on the entire planet. So who were they? I mean, where did they come from? And what was the journey that turned them into the Maya? To get to the bottom of that, we have to rewind way, way back to a time before any cities, to the very first human footsteps in this vibrant green world. The ancestors of the Maya didn't show up in some grand arrival. No, their story is much quieter. It began tens of thousands of years ago with a slow migration from Asia into the Americas. Then, for generation after generation, they just kept moving south until they finally walked into the dense, humid world of Mesoamerica. And this place, this environment, it forged them. The jungle wasn't just some pretty backdrop. It was alive, it was relentless, and it was seriously dangerous. You could find food, sure, but only if you knew the land inside and out. One mistake could easily be your last. Survival here wasn't about being the strongest. It was about being the smartest. It was all about knowledge. So these early hunter-gatherers, they were the foundation. But the true origin of the Maya people, the moment things really changed, it all boils down to a single revolutionary decision: the decision to stop wandering and to stay put. And that was only possible because of one tiny, revolutionary seed. And that seed was maize, what we know as corn. Starting around 7000 BCE, people in this part of the world began the incredibly long, difficult process of domesticating it. Now, this wasn't some quick discovery. We're talking about thousands of years of careful, patient cultivation to turn a wild grass into the reliable food that could actually build a civilization. And once they mastered maize, it changed absolutely everything. Suddenly, you could have permanent settlements. That, of course, led to population growth. For the very first time, people could store food, which gave them a safety net. And all that stability, it allowed for social complexity. This was the exact moment humans went from just surviving the jungle to actively reshaping it. So this agricultural revolution, it laid the groundwork for a really unique kind of civilization. The very land that gave them life also kept them separated, which pretty much guaranteed they'd develop in a way that was totally different from the other great ancient cultures. Just think about it for a second. Look at other ancient civilizations. Egypt had the Nile River, right? It was a single lifeline that made having a big unified empire almost inevitable. Well, the Maya world had nothing like that. It was this fragmented patchwork of lowlands, highlands, and coasts, and that kind of geography didn't produce a single empire. It produced a civilization of diverse, independent city-states. Now, as their societies got bigger and more complicated, just surviving day-to-day wasn't enough. People needed meaning, and they found it by looking up at the sky. This led to the second great pillar of their identity, a really profound and frankly fearful view of the entire cosmos. Their whole worldview was born from this simple but honestly terrifying realization. They believed the universe wasn't stable, that the natural order of things wasn't guaranteed at all. The seasons, the rains, even the sun rising every morning, they believed all of it could just stop. And that belief, it shaped everything. They didn't see time as a straight line. To them, it was a fragile, sacred cycle that humans had to actively work to maintain. This idea is what led to their complex calendars, their elaborate rituals, and the rise of divine kings, whose number one job was to negotiate with the unstable cosmos to keep the world running. Okay, so now let's see how these two massive forces, mastering the land and believing in a fragile universe, finally came together to create the Maya civilization that we all remember from the history books. A world of power, literally carved in stone. Between about 2000 BCE and 250 CE, things really took off. Little villages grew into towns, towns grew into actual cities, stone replaced wood for important buildings, monumental plazas for rituals started to appear, and crucially, writing shows up. Not to tell stories, but to record the power in the bloodlines of the kings who are in charge of keeping the cosmos in balance. But here's the thing you have to understand. Their brilliance was always living on a razor's edge. I mean, they engineered the entire landscape, terracing hillsides and building huge reservoirs for water. And yet they did all of this without any iron tools, without any animals to help them pull heavy loads, and without the wheel. Everything was built by human labor alone, which created a system that was incredibly impressive, but also incredibly fragile. And that fragility, that's the key. It really gets to the deepest truth of the Maya origin story, that their greatest strengths also carried the seeds of their biggest problems. This is where their origin story starts to become their destiny. Check out this paradox. Their greatest strength, maize, also made their entire civilization totally dependent on predictable rainfall. Their sacred kings provided stability by speaking to the gods, but that meant society's fate was tied to the success or failure of just one person. And their independent city-states, that fostered incredible diversity, but it also meant that rivalry often turned into endless, draining warfare. So when the climate started to shift and political conflicts spiraled out of control, that fragile system just couldn't hold. The great cities of the southern lowlands fell silent, the jungle grew back over the stone. But this is not an ending. The most important thing to remember here is that the people, they didn't vanish. In fact, far from being a lost civilization, today there are more than 6 million Maya people. They're farmers, artists, teachers, activists, living all across Mexico and Central America. They aren't relics in a museum. They are the direct descendants of this unbelievably deep human journey.